Yeah, welcome everybody to another video. I wanted to just give my analysis, and not just so I wouldn't want to say analysis. Let's just give you. I just want to provide a question to the audience here to ask you guys out of the two, and this is NFL football that I'm talking about. Out of the two NFC teams, okay, in regards to Cowboys and the Eagles, if someone asked you a question, if you were given the question to answer and they asked you which team had the most disappointing end, would you say the Cowboys or would you say the Eagles? Now, I think personally that the Cowboys had more of a disappointing end to me. Not because Cowboys have hype, not because of that. Let's look at both of the teams and let's go back. Let's look at everything in retrospect, okay? We understand that Eagles came off the Super Bowl appearance last football season, the previous football season. This season, they had a remarkable start. They started off like 10-1 or 10-2. One of the best records in the NFL, the best record in the NFL to be exact, and they just unraveled toward the end. So with the Eagles losing, it's not that much of a shock to me that they lost the way they lost. The reason why is because we saw this coming. And you have to ask yourself the question, which would be more of a shock? Would it be more shocking that Philadelphia beat the Bucks at Tampa? Or would it be more shocking that the Cowboys beat Green Bay? And to answer that question, I would say it would be more shocking that Eagles beat the Bucks at Tampa. Why? I'm going to tell you why. The reason why is because we already saw the Eagles unraveling toward the latter part of the year. I mean, their last 6 or 7 games were just going downward. They were losing games. I think they were like 1-6 in their last 7 games. They didn't end the season well. Or if not 1-6, maybe 1-5. Correct me if I'm wrong here. But the point that I'm making is that they didn't play well toward the end of the season. And we understand that in football, going into the playoffs, it's important how you go in. Records don't matter at the point. When you get into the playoffs in NFL football, I don't believe records matter at that point, because it just what's really important is how are you playing toward the end of the season? How are you playing going in to the playoffs? Most teams that are riding that hot wave tend to keep that momentum. Those teams are hard to beat. Wild card teams are very difficult to beat because they're riding that wave of momentum. They are essentially operating off of adrenaline rush because their playoffs began earlier than the teams that are sitting in byes. Like, for instance, look at the Texans. They had to win out. They had to beat the Colts. Then they had to beat the Browns. Now they're facing the Baltimore Ravens Saturday. So Texans are a dangerous team. Not because they have the best talent, not because they have Lamar Jackson. It's all about momentum. See, when you get into the upper echelon of any league, whether it's MLS, MLB, NBA, or NFL, you are talking about the cream of the crop, the best of the best athletes in those respective sports. What separates, now of course you have the outliers. You may have a dominant freak of nature athlete that just can do everything better than everybody else. But for the most part, the game is mental. It's a psychological game. It's an energy, it's a frequency, it's a force that comes with the team. When a team is riding a wave of momentum and they're playing with house money, they're the most dangerous team. Playing without pressure is something. Playing with pressure weighs you down. And believe it or not, people say, oh, pressure creates diamonds. Not necessarily. Pressure usually, more often than not, will bring out the worst out of you. People like to contort that sentiment and say, hey, when you have pressure, it brings out the best in you. Not always. Not when you're playing against another team that has no pressure. See, when two teams have pressure, then you guys are playing on an equal playing field because both have pressure. Now it just depends on who out executes the other team and what football team makes the less mistakes and which team has less penalties and so on and so forth, right? We understand that. But when you have a team that has nothing to lose, like the Green Bay Packers, they don't give a damn. They're like the youngest team in the playoffs. They looked at the Cowboys like, so We're just gonna go in there and just beat them. We're not even supposed to be here. When you're not supposed to be somewhere and there's no pressure, you play your best because you're playing free. Pressure is an added element. Pressure is actually a force. It's an energy. It's a being. It's sentient. It's aware because we feed it the energy. It siphons our energy and we give into it. So it's sort of like when you're pouring gasoline to the fire. We are the gas to the fire. We are gas to the fire as we are pressure. We are when we give our energy to pressure. Pressure becomes the flame that's ignited. And pressure is not always good because every little thing that happens, especially with the ebbs and flows that happens in games where you may get a call that doesn't go your way, you may fumble a snap, kickoff may go wrong. A multitude of things can happen in the game. When you have pressure and the world expects you to win the Super Bowl, like the San Francisco 49ers and the Baltimore Ravens, little mistakes along the way, you start to say, oh my God, we're not supposed to be making mistakes. We're the better team. Why is this game tied at halftime? Oh, hope we don't lose. While the other team is like, hell, we're not supposed to be here anyway. We're not supposed to be here anyway. We're just gonna keep playing. You see, the psychological component of football or in any sport weighs on you because rather than you just focusing on the game, you have these external things that are going on in your head, circumstances that you have playing out in your head. And that's all perception. And perception is all reality. When you start perceiving those things, it takes control of the most important thing. And the most important thing is like right now in the moment. Now you're thinking about other scenarios and other factors of how you're going to end up letting the whole NFL world down because the whole NFL world expected you to win the Super Bowl. You see how that works? That's added pressure is not always a good thing. Okay? Especially when you're playing against another team with no pressure. Okay? And especially in a team with no pressure who have talent, like Jordan Love, who has talent. We saw it. CJ Stroud, talent. Yeah. When those guys are young, it's house money. They don't care. So I say all that to say this. The most disappointing end was the Cowboys because the Cowboys were playing decent. They were playing well. You had a quarterback who was arguably, well, I'm not going to say arguably because you couldn't argue that he was the MVP this year, but he was in the talks he was in the MVP race at some point toward the latter part of the season. And of course, that fell off. And we all know that Lamar is going to get it. And the way that the Cowboys played was more consistent. They were not unraveling toward the end of the season. So them winning at home, especially knowing their home record, I was like, okay, them winning would not be a shock. Eagles winning would be a shock, which is why the most disappointing end to the season was Cowboys, especially the way they came out and looked. We expected the Eagles to look bad. They've looked bad the second part, probably like the last quarter of the year, moving on. They were just horrible. And every week we thought, okay, they're going to regroup. They're going to get it together this week. Okay, maybe this week. Maybe they never did. They never did. So to me, the Dallas Cowboys had the more disappointing end. And that's what happens when you have expectations. And whenever you're a team that's talked about all the time on TV news networks and pundits, sports pundits, I mean, they talk about Dallas as if they win the Super Bowl every year. They haven't won in years. In over 3 decades, man, they haven't won anything. And I believe that amount of exposure to a team, it's a gift and a curse. It's a gift because you're being talked about. It's also a curse because you put a bigger bullseye on your back. It's the same analogy that I gave with Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes. It's great that everyone's talking about Colorado. I mean, yeah, you want your name to be in people's mouths. You want people to talk about you. You want mainstream media to put most of their attention on your team. Social media, everybody's talking about Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes. But what does that do? You have your opposition. The op is coming. And when they're coming, they're going to put on their A game to prove to the world that you are not as good as you claim to be, or you're not going to be as good quickly as you are expecting to be. You put a bigger bullseye on your back. There's no need to give teams extra motivation. Teams are already going to compete hard. But when any team has Colorado on the schedule, they're like, oh man, that's Coach Prime. Oh man, it has the commercials. Oh man, Shador, they're always on TV. Man, we better play our best game. They're gonna come get you, especially when you are in the earlier stages of a rebuild. It's one thing. It's different when you had like Coach K at Duke because they were so dominant. Of course, teams got up to play Duke because many teams hated Duke. They wanted to destroy them, but it was hard to beat Duke at that time at their peak because they were already established as a strong team. When Mike Krzyzewski initially got there, they were not that dominant, and he slowly built that program to what it was when he was there. And Coach Prime is the opposite. He's coming in with all the flair and the flamboyance and all the pizzazz and all the glamour without having any substantial, substance behind the flamboyance. So it's almost as if we're treating him as if he's already won national championships and he hasn't done anything. He just got there like yesterday. So he's providing a target on his back, and him and his team better be ready with all the transfers that are coming in. They better be ready. So that's what happened with Dallas. The expectations were high, as they are every season. I don't know why. They're talked about all the time. You notice most teams that are talked about the most don't accomplish anything in basketball. And the Lakers are always being talked about. Of course, for obvious reasons. The Lakers is a historic franchise that has won plenty of championships, and they're well known. And add to that, they have one of the greatest players on their team, LeBron James. They're going to be talked about every week. Win, lose, or draw. And there are other teams that are flying underneath the radar, like the OKC Thunders. The teams that come to bite you in the butt during playoff time. Those are the teams with no expectations that are very dangerous. They have one or two. They may have one star or one budding star. They may not have a mega superstar on their basketball team, but they'll get you because there's no pressure. And so, the most disappointing end to me, and I want to get you guys' take on that too. Who do you think had the most disappointing end? Do you think it was the Dallas Cowboys or the Philadelphia Eagles? Now, maybe I'm a prisoner of the moment. I'm looking at what just happened, but they both recently just lost. But I'm looking at how they were playing going in. Like, more people thought, like, just without any bias, right? If you just looked at both teams, if Bucks lost to Eagles, as I said before, that's like, oh man, Eagles got it together. They finally won the game because they've been losing back-to-back games. They finally won, and they went to Tampa, a road game, and they won. That would be more shocking if they won. But if Dallas won, especially when you factor in their home record, I'm like, oh, well, I mean, they usually okay. They usually win at home. They usually play well at home. Put up about 30-something points a game. Yeah, it's not a big deal. So with that contrast of shock with Eagles and no shock with Dallas, that's what makes the Dallas loss more disappointing. Thus, their season more disappointing because we saw the unraveling nature of the Eagles as the season spiraled out of control toward the latter end. Okay? So that's my take on it. Just tell me what you guys think. And yeah. It's hard though. Sports is very difficult because football is one of those games where any given Sunday you can get trashed. And I think that every weakness of the Dallas Cowboys came to full fruition this last game. They've been poor against the run all year. They got exposed. Their secondary is iffy. They got exposed. Their defense overall is iffy. They got exposed. Their quarterback is inconsistent, and he showed his inconsistencies at the worst time that he could. Don't know why he and CeeDee Lamb were not on the same frequencies or they weren't aligned, why they were having miscues, but that's neither here nor there. The game is over. They lost. And I think the Dallas Cowboys had more of a disappointing end than the Eagles. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you guys think. Till next time.